Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We're going to begin our plenary session now. Again, one more time, our cell phones that are very important, they help us, but during a session, we don't want them to go off. Silent or mute or vibrate or even turn them off during this time. We'll thank you. Our hour and a half session, we're going to be excited to hear from Dr. Bryant Marks. And our introduction, he who introduces is getting ready to preach. So y'all sit back and get ready as Ronnie comes to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. If you haven't been a sponge thus far, now's the time to become a sponge and soak up all that our presenter will be sharing. Because it is a pleasure, my pleasure at this time, to introduce the speaker of this hour. I say pleasure because it is indeed just that. It's always a pleasure introducing or presenting such an outstanding person, one who is held in high esteem by all who know his works, one who can walk with kings, queens, and potentates and not lose the common touch, one who is truly an ambassador for peace and goodwill, one who recognizes the qualities and talents of others for what they are with admiration, and not a bit of envy, but with sincere praise and honor. Reverend Dr. Bryant T. Marks, Sr. is a minister, researcher, trainer, and award-winning educator. His calling, passion, purpose is to develop the knowledge, wisdom, and skills of others that will allow them to reach their full potential and live their lives with purpose and passion. Dr. Marks is an associate professor of psychology at Morehouse College and founder and lead trainer of the National Training and Education Center. He served on President Obama's Board of Advisors with the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. He recently served as senior advisor with the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and University, and currently serves as the inaugural Senior Research Fellow with the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. Dr. Marks was a contributor trainer with the Obama administration's My Brother's Keeper and 21st Century Policing programs. Dr. Marks has provided implicit bias training to over 1,400 police chiefs and executives via a series of briefings at the White House in 2016, and several thousand patrol officers in local police departments, including the entire Los Angeles Police Department. He has also provided training related to diversity and inclusion to individuals in education, K-12 and higher education, philanthropy, nonprofits, local and federal government, and several other sectors. He serves on several national boards and is a highly sought-after speaker and trainer. He holds a BA in psychology and a minor in economics from Morehouse College, and a master's and PhD in social psychology from the University of Michigan. Dr. Marks conducts research and professional development in the areas of diversity and implicit bias, Black male psychology and development, the academic achievement of minority college students, innovations in STEM education, which is a curriculum based on the idea of educating students in 4 specific disciplines: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, in an interdisciplinary and applied approach, and personal passion and productivity. Dr. Marks is married to Kimberly Marks and father to Kim, Zion Trinity, and Bryant II. He's the kind of person who can relate to a 2-year-old as well as youth, the middle-aged, and the senior person. So lest I bore you with all of these details, even though they are true, or take up more of his time, which would be a disservice to both you and to him, it is now my distinct privilege and immense opportunity to present to you a husband, father, mentor, friend, the dapper, dynamic, magnanimous, illustrious, industrious, intrepid, lucid, dynamic, efficacious, effulgent, distinguished orator, to whom I veil, the Reverend Dr. Bryant T. Marks. Let's give him a resounding ICPC welcome.
All right, appreciate that, sir. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, good to see you all this afternoon. My name is Bryant Marks. I appreciate that wonderful introduction. Good Reverend Dr. Roddy White there. Appreciate that. Hopefully I can live up to all that good stuff that you all said. But I do want to express some gratitude for being here today. I appreciate the time. I know you all have a lot going on in your schedule, and you all are doing some important work both locally in the organization and the jurisdictions that you serve. So I consider it a pleasure and honor to be here today. Thank you for your time and attention in advance. So in addition to being a minister myself, I'm also a PK. So my father was a Baptist preacher. He had a church in Long Island, New York City, where I'm from, born and raised, as well as in Atlanta for several years. So I grew up in the ministry and around church folk, as they say. And this is sort of a unique space to be in. I know we're ecumenical in our approach. I'm not just trying to, limit it to a certain denomination. But being in front of an audience like you, given the work I've done with law enforcement, and then being with chaplains who sort of stand at this interesting juxtaposition between law enforcement and the community, but have a value system around ethics and morality and so forth that's pretty unique. So I consider it a real honor and privilege to speak before you today. All right, so we can talk about the biases in a general sense. I'm going to try to incorporate a few different sectors because you serve some unique roles. So though the title of the time together is called The Hidden Biases of Good People, Implications for Law Enforcement Personnel and Communities They Serve, to some extent, some of you may consider yourselves partially personnel. Some of you have your own churches, so you're doing multiple things. So please don't look at the title as any sort of limitation. But I'm going to try to be as inclusive as I can and give you information that can help you in your day-to-day approaches to your work. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to try to keep this as interactive as possible, right? We know about call and response. I believe in that. So y'all can talk back to me, smile, say amen, whatever you need to say as we go along, all right? So here's the deal. I'm going to show you an image on the screen, okay? I'm going to flash it. It's going to be really quick. So I want you to tell me what you saw afterwards. So everybody looking at the screen, I'm going to flash an image. It's going to be really quick. Then I want you to tell me what you saw. All right, here we go. I'm going to flash real quick. Here we go. What'd you see? A face, okay? How many of y'all saw a face looking straight at you, looking directly at you? All right, how many of y'all saw a face looking to the side, a profile shot? All right, look again. Do you see both possibilities now? Here's the deal, folks. Two people can look at the same person or the same situation and see something completely different. As a matter of fact, one person can look at another person, have an initial impression, and then have what's called an aha moment, like you all just had. Aha, I see the other possibility, right? Now, your aha moment may be a few milliseconds, a few minutes, hours, weeks, months, or even years. It's all a matter of perspective. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is perspective taking, not only from the perspective of chaplains and your roles in terms of law enforcement and so forth, but also the public that you serve, elected officials, and a variety of other folks who have a stake in this thing that we call implicit bias, okay? So I'm going to show you another image. I'm also going to flash it. It's going to be pretty quick. Everybody looking again. You won't have to tell me what you saw. Just try to remember it for later on. All right, it's going to be really quick. Here we go. Really quick. Okay. Now, I know that was quick. It was supposed to be, okay? All right, so just that'll become relevant in our conversation as we proceed. So in terms of our questions for the day, I am a college professor, so these are our learning goals for the day, time permitting, what we're going to cover. I'm going to talk about what implicit bias is in terms of a background and definition. We'll talk about what it looks like in the real world in terms of day-to-day examples. Why does it exist in terms of its causes? How is it measured? How does implicit bias affect community-police interactions and outcomes? How can implicit bias be reduced or managed? Notice this does not say eliminated. As you will find out, implicit bias is something that can develop over one's lifetime, a few years, a few months, very hard to undo in about 90 minutes together. What I can do today is at a high level, put you on the road to acknowledgement, management, reduction, but elimination is a longer term proposition and a bit more challenging, but possible. And then finally, how can we reduce the impact of implicit bias on the interactions between ethnic minorities and police as a case study? So this is where we're going. And most of my sessions and trainings are either half day or full day. So I'm giving you about 3.5 hours of content, about less than half the time. We'll see how this goes. I may have to use my New York pace voice here and there, which may be a little quicker, but just to make sure we stay on time. I'll try to save about 5 to 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. I'll do my best as we can. And if somebody can just give me maybe a 10-minute warning when we're getting close, that would be helpful. Also, by way of housekeeping, I'm going to make these slides available to you as an organization as a PDF. So all the slides you see today will be available to you as electronically, so you can process them a bit later with some more time and attention, if you will. All right. So, in the spirit of interaction, I'm going to show you 2 options on the screen. I'm going to show you the 2 options. I'm going to say the 2 options, and then I want you to yell out loud, literally yell out loud, who or what is better. So I'm going to show you the options. I'm going to say the options, and I want you to yell out loud who or what is better. Now, this audience, again, you're used to call and response. I need you to be with me here, okay? All right, I'm going to say the options. And the thing is, these are easy. But even if you don't recognize either option, still yell one of the two of them out. Even if you don't like either option, still yell one of the two of them out. All right? Can you do that for me? Can you do that for me? All right, here we go. First up, who's better? Here we go. And these are easy, by the way. First up, who's better? Here we go. Beatles or the Rolling Stones? Okay, all right, interesting, okay. All right, next up, who's better? Here we go, who's better? Beyonce or Alicia Keys? All right, some of y'all are real quiet. Y'all know who Beyonce, Alicia Keys? Sir, right here in the front, on the end. Yes, sir. Yes, how you doing? Right here, look at, over here. How you doing? Do you know who Beyonce and Alicia Keys? Who'd you say? What? Which one of these did you say? I'm 74 years old. He said, I'm 74 years old. That's no excuse. Even if you don't recognize either option, even if you don't like either one, still yell one of the two of them out. All right, next one. This one may be sentimental for some of you all, but do the best you can. All right, next up, here we go. Who's better? Here we go. Billy Joel or Bruce Springsteen? Okay, interesting. All right, good deal. All right, next up, here we go. Who's better? Here we go. Michael Jackson or Prince? Okay, all right, interesting. All right, next up, here we go. Who's better? Mark Anthony or Romeo Santos? Some of you are like, rrr. All right. These are Latin recording artists, some of the top selling of all time, by the way, like in the history of music. All right. Next up, here we go. Who's better? Here we go. Would you rather have, I should say, a raise or a promotion? Okay, interesting. All right, for this next one, I want you to tell me what's, all right, this should be interesting. For this next one, I need you to dig deep. I need you to think about your time working with law enforcement and tell me what your preference is. What your preference is in terms of what's better. All right, what's better? Here we go. What's better? Here we go. Coffee or donuts? All right, you all in law enforcement, you know how this goes. All right, and finally, in terms of priorities, what's more important in your life right now? For this next one, what is more important? All right, next up, here we go. What's more important? Here we go. Your health or your wealth? All right, now many people are saying health. Here's the deal. What the research suggests in the United States is that we spend the first 2/3 to 3/4 of our lives sacrificing our health in the pursuit of wealth. Then we'll spend the last quarter to last third of our lives sacrificing our wealth trying to get our health back. Right? Isn't that interesting? Right? So, and I'm in my middle years, so I'm feeling this in a very real way, right? So it's very interesting. But here's the deal, folks. Why do I show you these things? These are all preferences, whether it's musicians, whether it's priorities and so forth. We all have preferences. And preferences are sort of a first cousin to implicit bias. Bias in its sort of raw technical form is a form of preference. But I just wanted to sort of get the juices flowing with some call and response, but we're going to work this into our conversation as we proceed as well. So I want to switch gears a bit and describe a scenario for you. This scenario is called the accident. The accident. Now, some of you may have heard this scenario before. So if, as I'm describing the scenario, you realize I've heard this before, do not respond to the question that I ask at the end, okay? If you realize you heard it before, just remain silent throughout. Don't whisper anything to your neighbor. All right, here we go. A father and his son are driving. It's late at night. It's raining pretty hard. The roads are really slippery. Car starts to swerve back and forth, spins out of control, crashes into a tree. The father is killed instantly. EMT workers come to the scene, pick up the son, take him to the nearest hospital. They check him out in the emergency room. They're like, wow, he's pretty banged up. He needs surgery. They send him upstairs to the operating room. The surgeon walks into the operating room and says, I cannot operate on this boy. He's my son. How is that possible? Pause. How many of you have heard this before in any form? Okay? Do not respond or whisper anything. For those who have not heard this before, I didn't have anything just whispered to them. Tell me how that's possible. And there are multiple possibilities, so just call them out. How's that possible? Go. Stepson, mom, what else? A father, a son, not related. Okay, maybe the father and the son are not related, okay. Priest, all right, some priests you call father. Good, that was quick, all right. We've heard of a variety of options, same-sex dads. We've heard sperm donor in the mix somehow, right? All right. But the notion is this. For those who've heard this before, what is the traditional answer to this riddle? The surgeon is the boy's mother. Think about it. A father and his son are driving. Father gets killed. Boy is taken to the hospital, up into surgery. The surgeon walks into the room and says, I cannot operate on this boy. He's my son. The surgeon is the boy's mother. right? Now, being completely honest, which I know you always are, being completely honest, think about the very first time you heard this, whether it was today or think back to the very first time you heard this. For how many of you, the very first time you heard this was your instant response, the surgeon is the mom? Okay, about 5 or 6, that's about right. The rest of us have some challenge with it, including myself. Here's the deal. Although intellectually you realize that women can be surgeons just like men, there still may be a little itty bitty part of you that equates surgeon with male. And that's implicit bias. That's where it lives, that's where it swims, that's where it functions. Unconscious associations between groups and traits that we don't even know we have. The reason you were stumped, had difficulty with that riddle, is because when you think surgeon, you think male, and you don't even know when it happened. Can you tell me the date? Exactly. But at some point along your lives, the recorder that's been running in your mind throughout your lifetime has been overexposed to a group and a trait. Surgeon male, surgeon male, surgeon male. And at some point it clicked in, and that association got locked. You don't even know when it happened. But I give you a riddle, and it doesn't occur to you that the surgeon could be the mom. And you're still good people. Right? I gotta say that a lot, right? Because implicit bias training, people go, oh, you're saying I'm a bad person. You're still good people. Today I'm talking about the machinery of your mind, not the content of your character. Right, that was pretty good. That was good, huh? Right, yeah, right? So when people go, right. So when people end these trainings, you gotta be careful, but in terms of implicit bias and diversity and inclusion work, folks, if you are a human being and you have a brain and you have a mind, you are going to have biases. The question is not, do you have any biases? That has been asked and answered. The science is clear. The answer is, yes, you do. Everybody take a moment to mentally inhale that. If you are human and you have a mind and you have a brain, you are going to have biases. Why? Because every single one of us have been overexposed to associations between certain groups and certain traits and certain groups in certain roles. Let's do it like this, and then I'll take your question. Let's do it like this. Being honest. Tell me who comes to mind, male or female, when I say the following occupations. Just be honest. Who comes to mind? Quickly. Don't try to impress me. Just go with your gut. All right, who comes to mind when I say nurse, male or female? Secretary, male or female? Flight attendant, male or female? Now, you all know that men could do those jobs just like women, right? You all do know that, right? Yeah, just checking. But the notion is this, by you saying female, that doesn't make you sexist, it makes you human. In your lifetimes, you may have come across more female nurses and female flight attendants and female secretaries. And the machine that's running in your mind is keeping track of that in a recording type fashion, to the point where it locks in association. Where I say nurse, you think female, and you're still good people. It's not about your intent. It's not about your motivation. It's not about your character. It's not about, are you a good person? It's about how your mind works. I am a psychologist. This is a scientific approach. I'm a person of facts and of faith. They both can coexist in the same person, right? And we'll talk more about that shortly, right? But again, folks, take the judgment of character out of this. What we're talking about is, as human beings, due to overexposure, certain biases can form, and we won't even know that they're happening, okay? All right, so because of this, of disproportionate exposure, yes, oh, that's a wonderful picture, that's great, okay? We all have, don't take them out yet. We all have biases, right? So when you're looking at images like this, you wonder what's going on there, right? So you have law enforcement embracing a young black male, right? That in and of itself may seem odd or strange to you. Why? Because you're not used to seeing it. That image in and of itself is like, ooh, that's different. Why? Because you haven't been exposed to this. You've been exposed to tension between black males and police. And so when you see some expression of affection between black male and police, it seems off. That's still a form of bias based upon overexposure to tension. Folks, I got 1,000 of these, right? The notion is, based upon what you've been exposed to over your lifetime, is going to set you up for certain expectations in your day-to-day experience and day-to-day groups with whom you deal, okay? So we're going to do something not normally done in trainings. You were told to put your phones on vibrate, but you could actually take them out. We're going to have some live anonymous polling. Live anonymous polling. So yes, take out your cell phones, take out your cell phones, take out your cell phones. We're gonna have some anonymous polling. I'm gonna put some questions on the screen. There are gonna be 2 ways you can participate in the poll. One is by going to a website, the other is by text message. I'll talk you through both of them. It's gonna be really quick, okay? This is anonymous. Nobody's being tracked or traced or spammed. Nothing bad will happen. All right, so here's your first question. This is sort of our practice question here, okay? Once this comes up. Okay, there we go. So there are 2 ways you can participate in the poll. One is by going to this website. So pull up your web browser, whatever it is, Safari or Chrome, whatever it is, right? The website is PollEv, and this can all be lowercase. POLL, E as in Edward, V as in Victor, pollev.com/ the word empathy. Type that into where you will put your www web addresses. Don't put it in your Google search field. It won't work. Whatever your browser is, go to that field all the way at the top and type in pollev.com/ empathy. Hit enter. Once you do that, the question you see on this screen will appear on your screen. Once you see it on your screen, tap A for yes, B for no, in response to this question. The question is, have you participated in implicit bias training in the past 2 years that lasted 1 hour or longer? Okay, A for yes, B for no. This is real-time polling. As you respond, there's about a 5 or 6 second delay, and then it shows up here. Okay, so if you're text messaging, all you have to do is text the word empathy. It can be uppercase or lowercase, it does not matter. Text the word empathy to the phone number 37607. So it's a 5-digit rather than a 10-digit number. So if you're texting, so for example, I recommend going to the website, but if you have a weak cell signal in this room, go with the texting option. 37607, that's the phone number, 5 digits, not 10. The body of that message should just be the word empathy. Hit send. Once you do that, wait about 8 or 9 seconds, you'll receive a confirmation message. It'll say, welcome to Dr. Marks' Poll Everywhere session. After you receive the confirmation message, then text the letter A and hit send, or the letter B and hit send in response to the question, okay? All right, so we're gonna do this a little bit like church. I want everybody to turn to the person on your left, turn to the person on your right, say, are you okay? Do you have it? Are you okay? Do you have it? Go ahead and check on each other real quick. Help each other out. Once you see the words response received, you're good. All right, so nobody who has it should be sitting near somebody who does not. You are communal people, help each other out. So if you have it and you see the words response received, that means you've done it successfully. Look around and help your neighbors out. Once you see the words response received or response recorded, you are good. All right, we have about 82, that's a good number, all right, okay. Now, this is really powerful software. So for those who are in churches, pastors and so forth, this is great for congregations. Like if you're at a church meeting and you want feedback from the church, you want to vote anonymously, all that stuff can be done with this technology, right? I know pencil and paper, that's cool if you want to stay with pencil and paper, no judgment, but you can see here, and this allows you to instantly record it. So if you have minutes, say you have a church meeting and you have a vote, it's instantly up here, you record it as part of the minutes. You download it electronically, it's part of the minutes. You could dump this into a Word document, just as an image, and you got your vote, right? It's completely anonymous. Now, I mean, it supposes that everybody will have a device, right? So you can just say, those who don't have devices, you can vote manually. So you can have a combination, but it's very powerful software. All right, so what do we see here? And I need you to see your own data as well. All right, so again, last year I trained over about 15,000 law enforcement officers, just in law enforcement alone, not to include nonprofit and other sectors. And so we try to get some sense of the level of exposure people have had to implicit bias. So 33% roughly of you have had some training. What I teach you today will not be in conflict with previous training. What I teach you today will build upon previous training, assuming that your previous training was based on a science of implicit bias. All right, so this is sort of our practice question. Wonderful, hit 100, that's great. All right, next question for you. And also, you can change your mind. As long as a question is still on the screen and it's multiple choice, you can say you tap A initially, you think about it, you tap B, the B will replace the A. Your most recent response will be the one that counts as long as a question is still on the screen. All right, next question. For the most part, I grew up in where? A, the East Coast, B, the Midwest, C, the South, D, the West, E, another country. So go ahead and tap in. And if you're text messaging, once you're in, you're in. Once you're texting, you do not have to text the word empathy any longer. All you have to do, if you're texting, is text A, literally one letter, A, B, C, D, or E, and hit send, and you're done. All right, I know you all are tech savvy. You're gonna wanna do more. You wanna log in and refresh. Don't do any more, okay? It's supposed to be easy, okay? So go ahead, tap, all right? And so you look at our responses here. This is real-time data. Here's the thing, we talk about the basis of bias. Now, when you talk about the basis of bias, certain bases are visible. Race, gender, age, we're gonna talk about that. Things you can see based upon the package with which people present themselves. Other bases of bias you cannot see. They're less visible. This is an example. Where did you grow up? I can't look at you based on your package and tell where you grew up, and neither can you. I can't look at you based on your package and tell even if you grew up in this country, and neither can you, right? So we have to be very careful about looking at someone. Sometimes we look at some folks and we try to size them up, right? We look at them, we categorize them according to race, gender, and age, and based on how they present themselves, all right? So you can look at me, you say, okay, so he says he's a professor. I believe that. He has on a suit, he has on, the bow tie, glasses, kind of looks like a professor. Okay, but say you saw me downtown walking around, black man, suit on, in the summertime, bow tie, low cut, you might think Nation of Islam, just by the look, right? The package matters. You may draw different conclusions based upon the situation. That's just human psychology. It's not a judgment piece, okay? But I need you to understand, I can't look at you and tell this diversity of experience, and neither can you. But this diversity of experience, which I cannot see, can be a very strong part of your identity. And you may base some bias on where people are from and where they grew up and based upon your personal experiences that people can't see coming based upon the package, okay? All right, but this is wonderful. You have wonderful diversity here. 21% East Coast, 36% Midwest, 25% from the South, 13% from the Midwest, 5% from another country. That's good for this organization. As an organization, you want national representation. Why? Because people from varying backgrounds and perspectives make better decisions. The science is clear. Diversity of thought leads to better decisions. Now, diversity of thought can sometimes correspond with race and gender and so forth. It may or may not, but you still want people in the room at the table that bring different perspectives to bear, okay? All right, so moving on here. So we all have biases. I talked about this. It's just a matter of being human. It's not a matter of the content of your character and so forth. It's going to happen. Now, although we all have biases, the impact of our biases on others does depend on the roles we play in society. Let's do it this way. Say you had two people. One is a professional dog walker, and one is an orderly, an employee at a senior citizen facility. Say both of them have a strong negative implicit bias toward the elderly. For which one of them do you think their bias toward the elderly will actually affect elderly people? The orderly, right? Not a trick question, right? The orderly doesn't have bias because he's an orderly. The dog walker has the same level of bias. Both of them could have been overexposed to negative traits with the elderly. But the orderly is in a position, in a role where once his biases are expressed, it's more likely to affect the target group simply based upon his role. So having the bias in and of itself, that's the human part. We all are going to have them. However, your biases as a human being can interact with the situation. Right, let's do it this way. Say you have a company, and there's a CEO, who's a man, and there's a young guy in a mailroom. Both of them have a strong negative implicit bias towards women. For which one of them do you think the experience of women throughout that organization is going to be affected? CEO. The CEO doesn't have bias because he's a CEO. The guy in the mailroom has the same level of bias. But because of the CEO's role, position, rank, and authority, the expression of his bias is going to affect women systematically and have ripple effects simply because of the responsibility that CEO has. That's why I'm tough on leaders. Leaders got to get this right. Leaders are just as human as everybody else, so they're going to have biases like everybody else, right? But leaders are in a position where the decisions affect practice, policy, and so forth that can affect large numbers of people. So leaders have to be more diligent and vigilant about keeping their biases in check simply due to their role, rank, and responsibility. They're just as human. So it's one thing to try to change your mind and be less biased. It's another thing to put practices and policies in place that limit the likelihood of your biases affecting an outcome. So if you're in a leadership role, you gotta dig a little deeper. You have more responsibility because your decisions have ripple effects over mass numbers of people. So we all have biases because we're human, but the impact of our biases on others depends on the roles we play in society. Let me make this plain, this last piece. We all have biases. Because some people are like, oh, I don't have any biases. I treat everybody the same way all the time on every condition. Please, no, you don't. That's ridiculous. If you ever love somebody, you've shown some bias. If you ever dislike somebody, you've shown some bias. Let's do any parents in the room? Parents in the house? Okay, all right, let's do it here, all right? So, say you're the dad in the black shirt. Yeah, you're the dad, and these are your two kids right here, right? Say they're young kids, all right? Say they're young, right? And so you're out to dinner with you and your two kids, right? And dinner is over, and you're paying for the meal for you and your two kids, okay? How likely is it, or how often do you walk over to the next table and pay for the meals of children that belong to another set of parents? Rarely, okay? Why not?
Hey, I'm cheap, but
Right? But just keep it basic. What's the difference between these kids and those kids?
they're mine.
Right. He said they're mine. Listen to the language. Listen to the language. They're mine. In other words, what he's saying, what you all were thinking, because you're like, I don't do that. And I'll say, why not? Because they ain't my kids. I'm sorry, they aren't my children, right? But the notion is this, right? What he's really saying, what you all were thinking was, they're not part of my group. Some groups we call family, some groups we call friends, some groups we call colleagues. But the overwhelming psychological science says we tend to treat in-group members slightly or much better than out-group members. It is the nature of the human condition. It is how we are wired, literally. We are social at our very core. Whether it's faith or facts, we are social at our very core. Social just means built to connect with other people. Human beings cannot develop psychologically and physically without the help of the other, making us social. Say I had a 2-week-old infant baby. So I had a 2-week-old infant baby, and I laid him down right here. Put him on the floor, and I left. And I came back an hour later. Where would that 2-week-old infant baby be? It'd be right there. It's 2 weeks old. He's not getting up and walking away. He's not mobile, right? So the notion is, as human beings, we go through an extended period of total and complete dependency on other human beings for our psychological and physical development. We would literally die without the help of other human beings, making us inherently social. But here's the thing. We are built to connect, but all our connections are not the same. What do I mean? Everybody in your life is not the same. I know you all are good, loving people, all included. I get it. But everybody in your life is not identical. What do I mean? Being completely honest. Say you're walking down the street. So you're walking down the street, and a stranger comes up to you. And the stranger says, hey, whatever your respective city is. The stranger says, hey, I have a 6 o'clock flight tomorrow morning. Can you come to my house at 4:15 in the morning to pick me up and take me to the airport for free? Stranger says this. How many of you all would seriously consider that? Okay. Say it was your spouse, your parent, your child, your best friend, somebody close to you. How many of y'all would at least consider it? Okay. What's the difference in those two scenarios? Somebody you know, somebody you don't. Relationship. Everybody in your life is not the same. And we understand you have relationship with some and not with others. You may not take a stranger to the airport simply due to a safety concern. Just like that. You're still good people, right? But in our country, in our culture, it's acceptable that we have certain biases. We take our spouse, our child to the airport at 4:15 in the morning and not the stranger. And nobody says, you're discriminating, you're a bad person. We don't say that, even though it is differential treatment. So certain types of biases are perfectly acceptable in our country and culture for a variety of reasons, safety and so forth. So again, folks, just mentally inhale. If you are human, you are going to have biases, but not all biases are inherently bad. Depending on the situation, certain biases can be appropriate, self-protective, and quite functional. Okay? You provide food, clothes, and shelter for the kids in your house, not the kids up and down the street, and we get that, and we understand that, and we don't say you're a bad person. That's an acceptable, understandable type of bias. Your kids and not all the other kids. We get that. We accept that. But if you show bias towards your children, if you're a hiring manager, your child applies for a job, and there's 7 other people more qualified than your child, and you still hire your child, that's bad kid bias. All right? Bias at home, food, clothes, shelter, good kid bias. Bias at work, hiring an unqualified person, bad kid bias. Why? Here's the question. The question is not, do you have any bias? The question is, what is the impact of your bias on others? If you have bias towards your children and you're at home or you're paying for their meal, food, clothes, and shelter, you're not disadvantaging others in a systematic way. But if you're a hiring manager and you hire an unqualified child, you have disadvantaged others. Why? Because those 7 other people don't have a shot at the job, and by hiring an unqualified person, you're undermining your organization's ability to reach its goals and missions. It's the same kid bias, favoritism towards your child. At home, we get it. At work, not so good. Same bias, different situation. Are y'all getting this? Right? So it's the notion of being human, the bias is going to be there, but how it gets expressed by your roles and the situations, that's the key. If we accept those notions, we all bias because we're human, but the impact depends on our roles in society, we are golden because it's no longer about your character, nor you're a good person, okay? All right, so let's move. So what is implicit bias? We're going to work towards a formal definition. So I want you to take out your phones again and answer this next question. This is a word cloud. When Americans think of people from New York City, what words or phrases come to mind? So for this one, your responses should either be one word or a 2-word phrase. If it's a 2-word phrase, put a dash or a hyphen in between your 2 words, okay? You can respond twice. And don't try to impress me. Just go with your gut. What traits or characteristics come to mind when you think of folks from New York City? When Americans think of New Yorkers, what comes to mind, okay? And here's the deal with the word cloud. The words that appear on the screen in the largest font size, those are the responses that were given most frequently. So the bigger it is on the screen, the more people who gave those responses. All right, so here we go. Let's take a look. All right, and respond twice if you can. All right, aggressive, big mouth, narcissistic, metropolitan, 9/11, business people, liberal, culture, diverse, snob, stupid, okay, aloof, let's see, proud, rude, pushy, fast, minister, okay, busy, Yankee, Gwen Ruff, okay, opinionated, stringer, Jessup. What else? Service, fast, loud, spirit, aloof, lost, dark, Yankees, Yankee, steal your soul, wow, hood, cold, let's see, what else? Rich, proud, hurried, arrogant, demanding, impolite, city, fast, uncaring, let's see, cab drivers, okay, interesting. All right, so we got a lot of these coming in. Now, here's the deal. When we look at these responses, right, the ones that are standing out, arrogant, loud, and rude. All right, let me help y'all out with something. As a New York City person with this rude thing. Now, here's the deal. New York City people are not actually rude. New York City people are just time and task efficient. That's what we are. We will help you. We may not smile or give you a compliment as we do. We're helpful people. You just got to keep it moving, right? It's an efficiency model, all right? But nonetheless, we have these traits that come up when it comes to New York City people, and this is one question. Now I'm going to flip the question, same format, different target group. When Americans think of young black males, what words or phrases do you think come to mind? All right, so for this one, it's the same format, one word or two-word response. I think that was a response to the last one. All right, so we'll let that sit. But it's gonna be a one-word response, a two-word response, just like the last one. And if you have two words, put a hyphen in between as a two-word phrase. All right, and again, go with your gut. Do not try to impress me. This is not about what you believe. When Americans think of young black males, what traits or characteristics do you think pop to mind? Okay, not what you believe. This is completely anonymous. Okay, here we go. Disadvantaged, biased, unemployed, aggressive, confused, afraid, lazy, criminal, fatherless, thugs, let's see, angry, risk, gangster, irresponsible, struggling, threatening, energetic, violent, cocky, crime, no good or no, okay, strong, fight, thug, sneaky, smiles, teeth, okay, interesting. Racist, mad, challenged, friendly, poor, rude, oh, where we got that from before, lost, okay, resourceful, angry, anti-white, brother, okay, all right, a few more of these come in. All right, now here's the deal. As we let these come in, and I'm gonna go ahead and lock this in a second just so we could, let me see. All right, let's go ahead and lock that in. All right, so here's what I need you all to do. I need everybody to look at either screen. Everybody looking at the screen, everybody looking at the screen, everybody looking at the screen. Here's what I need you to do. Looking at the screen, I need you to take a moment and think about the possibility, or consider the possibility, of you walking through life with this as your personal brand. Imagine when people thought of you as an individual, literally you as an individual, they thought of you and this is what came to mind. When you walk into the office building for the interview, this walks in with you. When you walk into the bank for the loan, this walks in with you. When you walk into the office hours of that professor seeking help, this walks in with you. When you walk down the street past that police officer, this walks with you. Literally imagine when people thought of you as an individual, this came to mind. And I need y'all to feel the weight of the moment. This is not about guilt. This is about empathy. Can you see the world through the eyes of somebody different than you? Just for a few seconds. Now, I'll take you further, because remember, the question wasn't, what do you believe? You may not believe any of this. The question was, what comes to mind when Americans think of this group? And because you can fill a slide up with these characteristics, it's not about what you believe. It doesn't reflect your belief. It reflects your exposure. It's in your system. That's how you can generate these words and phrases, because you've been exposed to it. Right? Now, here's what you have to understand from a social cognition perspective. Social means other people. Cognition is how we mentally process information. So social cognition is how we mentally process information about other people. When you see another person and you categorize them according to race, gender, and age, whatever information you associate with those categories come to mind just by seeing them. What you may not know is when you see a young black male, whether you know it or not, this gets activated just by seeing them. The category, we're talking about how your mind works, the category will activate the associated traits. And whether you know it or not, once those traits are activated, it can influence how you speak to that person, whether you hire that person, all sorts of other decisions, and you won't even know that it's happening. And you're still good people. That's what makes it implicit. We're talking about the hidden biases of good people today. Yes, there's blatant racism and homophobia and sexism exists, all that stuff, absolutely. It's blatant stuff out, all the isms are out there. Now, talk about that today. Today, I'm talking about good, well-meaning people like you and I who want to do the right thing, who want to be fair and impartial. Even amongst us, bias can still creep in. Why? Because we are human. That's the tie that binds. Your humanity makes you susceptible to certain biases. Okay? All right. But again, I need you to feel this. Now, here's the deal. When I advance the slide, because the thing is, for many of your jurisdictions, not all of them, depending on where you come from, but many of your jurisdictions, you may have thousands of young black males in your cities where you work with your law enforcement agencies. This is their day-to-day experience. What's going to happen is I'm going to advance the slide. And once I advance the slide, you'll go back to being you. Me again. And the weight of this moment will dissipate. Here's what you must understand. For some people in your communities, there is no next slide. This is it. All day, every day. This is not about guilt. This is about empathy. Now imagine if this wasn't true about you. Imagine when people thought of you, they thought of this, but it wasn't true. Imagine the psychic and mental energy it would take for you to go about your life day to day, constantly trying to disprove this in a perpetual state of, oh, I'm not like that, I'm not like that, I'm not. That's like a part-time job. That could be exhausting. Think about that. It doesn't apply, but you constantly have to show people that it doesn't, right? Okay, folks. So the notion is this, and again, I wish I could go a little deeper and so forth, but I need you all to see this. I don't walk in with assumptions. I collect the data, you see it on screen, and then we discuss it. I don't assume you believe this, but I do assume you've been exposed to it, and your data has proven that to be the case. Still good people. We still smile. Still good people, right? But the notion is you've been exposed to this. We live in a society where these traits have been associated with young black males. But what do we call these things, by the way? When we have traits associated with a group in an overgeneralized way, what's the formal term for that? Stereotypes. Wonderful, right? Psych 101. Let's get it in. All right, so stereotypes, a generalization about a group in which identical characteristics are assigned to all members of the group, regardless of actual variation amongst the group members. It can be based upon one's gender, one's age, one's profession, and so forth. At the end of the day, stereotypes are beliefs that associate groups with traits. Surgeon equals male. Nurse equals female. Asian equals good at math. Black male equals athletic, whatever. You think of certain groups, certain traits come to mind. Like for some of you, when you thought New York City, you thought rude, right? How do I know you're gonna say that? I just had it ready, like magic, right? But the notion is the group, New York City people, the trait rude. So you think about stereotypes, this thing, group and trait. It's information, cognition, no feeling, no behavior, all right? When we talk about stereotypes, it's a key piece I need you all to get, this notion of a kernel of truth. It is sometimes the case that a group of people may possess a characteristic to a greater extent than other groups, but it doesn't mean that every member of the group will possess that trait, all right? So here's what we're gonna do. The bottom line for the kernel of truth is just because it's true of some doesn't mean it's true of all. So on your phones, I want you to answer this next question. Which of the following describe the number of 15 to 24-year-old Hispanic American males from highest to lowest? Assume they graduated from high school. Okay? Which one of these three sequences? So option A would be you think there's more young Hispanic males in the military, followed by the penal system, prison, followed by college. Option B, you think there's more in the penal system, followed by college, followed by the military. Or option C, you think there's more in college, followed by the penal system, followed by the military. Which one of these three sequences do you think is correct when it comes to young Hispanic American males from highest to lowest? Assume they graduated from high school. All right? Let's go ahead and just tap in. None of y'all should be typing. Don't Google it. Don't try to type it and see what's going on, y'all. All right, just go ahead and tap the response. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna show you all these results as one time. It's gonna be revealed, quite dramatic, like a home renovation, right? Move that bus. All right, so we're gonna move the bus, see what you said. Here we go, move the bus, here we go. Interesting. So roughly 48% of you all are saying A, 32%, 31% saying B, 20% saying C. Here's the deal, folks. All right, well, the vast majority of y'all are chaplains. You're in the same organization, right? You have other things in common. I can't look at you based upon the external package and tell how you think, and neither can you. With all the confidence that you said A, the person sitting next to you, who you know for 20 years, might have said B or C. Diversity of perspective, diversity of thought, and that can be critically important beyond the package. If you perceive young Hispanic males as most of them being locked up, and somebody else sees most of them as in college, don't you think if they're coming up with a solution or a program for young Hispanic males in their jurisdiction, they may approach it differently if they have two different perspectives, and you can't look at their package and tell how they think? That's why we have to communicate and ask the question. I don't assume. I collect the data. All that you have in common, there's still diversity of thought. You all don't think alike, and it's okay. But let's acknowledge that it is the case, and it's valid to have different perspectives. All right, let's go ahead and lock this in. So here's the deal. In terms of the answer to this question, here we go. The answer is C. So 80% of you all have a misperception, right? Still good people. I love you. Still good, right? Misperception. The thing is, it's all good. Let's look at the data here, right? So let's break this down a bit. So these are post-secondary pathways for when young people graduate. Oh my goodness. When some young people graduate from high school, there are basically 6 different buckets within which they can fall once they graduate from high school. They can go to college, that's post-secondary education. They can get a job. They may join the military. They may be unemployed. They may be incarcerated, or they may be deceased. These shades of gray beneath the horizontal line represent the less than positive outcomes. The shades of purple above the horizontal line represent the more constructive or productive outcomes. For each one of these pairings, males are on the left, females are on the right. These are all racial groups combined. These are African Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, and white Americans. The question was about Hispanic American males. That's this group right here. 33.4% of them in college, 5.2% incarcerated, 1.1% in the military. That's your answer. Now, if some of you were surprised by this, and when I presented to a lot of law enforcement, they are surprised to the point where they might say something from the audience. They'll say something like, oh no, that can't be right. That can't be right. 6 times the rate in college as incarcerated, that can't be right. Why might that say that? Because of disproportionate exposure. Think about the role of the law enforcement officer. All right, question. When do police show up? Right, when bad stuff happens, right? They go from bad thing to there's crime, there's a victim, there's a suspect, they go from bad thing to bad thing. A cop in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, I trained the entire department. They've got a great chief down there, great officers, Winston-Salem, right? I'm trying to learn cop psychology, so I'm going on ride-alongs, I'm going to lunch and watching documentaries, and a cop pulls me aside. He says, Dr. Marks, what you have to understand about officers, if you want to understand this better, is that we spend roughly 95% of our time with the worst 5% of society. And when he said it like that, I got it. 95% of their time with the worst 5% of society because they show up when bad stuff happens. They literally fight crime. They're not showing up for milk and cookies, y'all. They're showing up when bad stuff happens disproportionately. So if you go from bad thing to bad thing to bad thing, if you're a white cop, you're patrolling a Hispanic neighborhood, and you're overexposed to the gangbangers and criminals, only the 5%, because the vast majority of them, law-abiding citizens. Cops not dealing with them. They're dealing with the worst 5 to 10%. So if they're overexposed to the worst 5 to 10%, say these young Hispanic males, and once they punch out, no other exposure to young Hispanic males. When you show them a statistic like that, they think young Hispanic males in college, what do they say? That can't be right. And they can still be a good person. Got to get this. Good people can be overexposed in association between a group and a trait, and regardless of the content of the character, the machinery of their mind will lock in that association, and they won't even know when it happened. Just like it did for you. Surgeon equals male, nurse equals female. You don't know when it happened. So that good cop in a Hispanic neighborhood can develop the same association. I'm not saying there's no isms, racism, sexism, whatever in law enforcement. Those isms are everywhere. But what I am saying is a good person can be overexposed to an association between a group and a trait, and it gets locked in, and they won't even know that it's happening. That's what I'm saying. And we are all susceptible. Okay? All right. So, stereotypes, this is wonderful, this is great. I got to pick up the pace. I'm almost running out of time. All right, so prejudice, right? What I'm trying to do here is give you some clean language. Stereotype is the thinking. Prejudice is the feeling. What do I mean? Positive or negative attitude, judgment, or feeling about a person that is generalized from attitudes or beliefs such as stereotypes held about the group to which that person belongs. It's a prejudgment that involves liking or disliking. That is the key. Liking or disliking. Question. Say you go home today. So you go home today, and you go home through your mail. I mean, not today, whenever you go home from the conference, right? You go home, and you're going through your mail, and you come across a letter. And the letter says that a registered sex offender will be moving in next door to you, okay? How many of y'all feel happy about that? Okay, all right, it's cool, right? Now, here's the deal. I'm going to push you a little bit. What do I mean? In the state of Georgia, the cutoff age for statutory rape, 16 years old. We've had several high-profile cases where a 16-year-old male has sex with a 15-year-old female, high school kids. The father of the female finds out, he's upset, wants to press charges. He does so. The male goes through the criminal justice system, and he's convicted. Why? It's statutory. He goes into prison and comes out as what? A registered sex offender, right? Now, when we think registered sex offenders, we don't tend to think high school kids. We tend to think like creepy old guy, like 8-year-old girl, something like that. But even with that group, to whom many of us had an instant negative visceral reaction, I can poke a hole of exception, even with them. So imagine all the other groups with whom we come into regular contact where the exceptions are not that hard to find if I could find one here. Matter of fact, I'll take it deeper. Being completely honest, which you always are, being completely honest. When I said to you that a registered sex offender was moving in next door to you, right? How many of you all thought that that registered sex offender was female? Not positive, was your instant thought? Okay, all right. So the notion is, for the most part, no. I'll say for the most part, with a possible. So 1 out of over 100 folks, right? So I get, all right, possible. For most of us, we didn't think that. Isn't that interesting and biased? When you think registered sex offender, you think male, and you don't even know when it happened. Can you tell me the date? Exactly. And what I submit to you is there are thousands of other associations just like that swimming around in your head, below conscious awareness. You don't even know they exist, and you're still good people. But it can still affect you, okay? So let's dig in here. I got to get to so prejudice is the feeling, discrimination is the behavior. So stereotype is thinking, prejudice, feeling, discrimination is behavior. A negative or positive behavior towards someone based on positive and negative attitudes one holds towards a group to which that person belongs. It's the behavioral manifestation of prejudice. This is where you can observe behavior. You can measure behavior. If you want to know whether bias is at play or not, you don't ask somebody, are you implicitly biased? That's dumb. It's implicit. They probably don't even know. If you want to know whether bias is at play or not, you look for patterns of behavior over time. You know a tree by the fruit that it bears, and most people leave crumbs. I just said something there. If you look at somebody's life long enough, you're gonna find patterns. And you might find patterns in other people's lives before they do. They can be good people who have a pattern. It's implicit, the bias is there, but they don't even see it, right? So we can have honest conversations. If you wanna know whether bias is at play, and talk to your law enforcement officers about data. Look at patterns of behavior over time. Who gets citations? Who gets arrested? Who gets the complaints? Not only by department, but officer by officer and unit by unit. Look for patterns over time. Why? Because we are not very good at remembering patterns over extended periods of time as human beings. We're horrible at that. We guesstimate. We're not very good, okay? All right, so our definition of implicit bias, here we go. And I only got a few minutes left, wow. Mental associations between certain groups with specific traits, such as stereotypes, below conscious awareness, you don't even know you have them, which are often followed by subconscious prejudice, liking or disliking, and or discrimination behavior in a manner that typically benefits oneself or one's group and or disadvantages an outgroup. Implicit bias tends to involve an limited or inaccurate perception of others, okay? This is nuance. I'm giving you subconcepts, stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination to define a larger macro concept, implicit bias. From this day going forward, when you hear the phrase implicit bias, I want you to stop and ask yourself, is it happening at the thinking level, feeling level, or behavior level, or all three at the same time? What do I mean? When I told you that a registered sex offender was moving in next door to you, for many of you all, you know what happened? Whatever information you associated with that category, registered sex offender, rushed to mind. For many of you, that information was negative, which led to a negative feeling. And from that feeling, you began to think about, I would avoid that person, keep my kids away from that person. So you went from thinking to feeling to behavior in milliseconds without any conscious effort or thought, right? Now, implicit bias can also start and stop at the thinking level. You can associate a negative trait with a group and not dislike that group and not mistreat that group. Absolutely possible, okay? All right, so on your phones, answer this next question. According to the implicit associations test, Americans' strongest negative implicit attitudes are towards which one of these four groups? Which one of these four groups do you think are on the receiving end of the most negative implicit bias? A, women. B, African Americans. C, the elderly. D, the obese. Okay, go ahead and chime in. All right. Let's see how you all are trending. Let's take a look. It'll come back. All right. Ooh, interesting. So we got 6% saying women, roughly 39% saying African Americans, about 2% saying the elderly, 54%-ish saying the obese. Folks, many of you all are chaplains, in the same ministry, in law enforcement, in the same association, known each other 5, 10, 15 years, all that stuff you have in common, but you still think differently. Look at your data. This is diversity of thought. And I can't look at you and tell how you think, and neither can you, based upon your package, okay? Now, when we look at this, right, and this makes some sense, right, based upon popular culture and everything else, I can understand why this is pretty typical in terms of the trainings that we do. So let's go ahead and lock this in. But in terms of the answer, here we go. The answer is C, bang, the elderly. So 99% of you all have a misperception. You're still good people, right? But the notion is, folks, here's what you have to understand. The vast majority of your perceptions of your own group and other groups are based upon personal experience. So what you did when answering this question, you did a rough calculation. Okay, what have I seen? Okay, I think this. You did a do-do-do-do-do, and you came up with your answer. You didn't. How many of y'all cited an article that you read when you were coming up with your answer? Did you think, oh, I read this article in 1997? Exactly. You went upon personal experience. Our personal experience, though valid, has limits. Be very careful in trying to generalize your personal experience to an entire group, even if it's your own group. You're better than that. Your personal experience is valid, but it doesn't mean it generalizes. All right, so let's look at our findings. So over the last 20, 25 years of implicit bias research, here's what we know. Most biases in the US arise from external characteristics such as race or gender. So you have the isms there, racism, sexism. Other common targets of biases in the US, Arabs and Muslims. So religion and ethnicity can play a role, particularly for these groups since 9/11. Next, people who are overweight, they are a common target of bias, that is true. LGBTQ communities, common target of bias. Undocumented individuals, common target of bias. But America's strongest negative bias in the US is actually toward the elderly, followed by the obese. Some of y'all looking a little flat-faced right now. Allow me to psychologize. Here we go. So here's a question. Or let me set this up first. In the US, we have a pretty strong what we call pro-youth bias. We tend to value the younger versions of ourselves and the younger versions of other people. What do I mean? So as many of us age in the U.S., our bodies go, not in the U.S., but as many of us age, our bodies go through changes, right? Hair starts to disappear from certain places, starts to appear in other places, right? You get out of bed in the morning, your body starts to snap, crackle, and pop, making all types of noises, right? Random illnesses popping up. So our bodies change over time, right? Now here's the deal. For many of us, as our bodies change over time, we engage in what I call alterations, right? What is that? The comb over. Get a little piece, get a little color, get a little plug, we get a little nip, we get a little tuck, we get spanked up and sucked in and all these different things, right? Why do we do all that? To maintain the younger versions of ourselves. In many instances, it's not about health, it's about beauty, right? As many of us age, we're not running to a nutritionist, we're running to a procedure, right? In terms of plastic surgeons per capita, America, US is actually number 3. Anybody know the 2 countries ahead of us? Plastic surgeons per capita, anybody know? South Korea and Brazil, right? Pretty interesting, right? So we're number 3. But the notion is, as we age, we go through different changes and look at our society. It's not about being healthier. A lot of times it's about vanity. Let's do it this way, all right? Question. If you could choose to be any age for the rest of your lives, just in terms of your body, not your mind, right? If you could choose to have think about your lifetime, pick an age, right? You could choose to be any age for the rest of your lives in terms of your bodies. How many of y'all would choose a body that's over 60 years old? Okay, right? When you think about the elderly version of yourselves, right? The 80, 85, 90-year-old version of yourselves, right? When you project yourselves into that age bracket, what sort of traits or characteristics come to mind? Just yell them out. What comes to mind? Frail. Tired. Wrinkled. Wisdom, okay? Pain. So a lot of things that come to mind when we do this research across the country is physical, loss of vision, loss of hearing, pain, immobility, diapers, Viagra, whatever. Different things come to mind, right? People say different things, right? Now, the notion is this, that the traits tend to be physical and they trend negative. Here's the deal, folks. Whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Middle Eastern, Native American, rich, poor, male, or female, Father Time is undefeated. All of us are heading that way. Either you're gonna die young or in middle age, or you're gonna get old. You can't have it both ways, right? This is not the movie Get Out. How many of y'all saw the movie Get Out? Anybody see the movie Get Out? Oh, really? Y'all need to watch the movie Get Out. It's on demand, on Netflix, on HBO, the movie Get Out. It's an interesting interplay between the value of race, life, and age. What are you willing to give up to be young again? But nonetheless, all of us are heading that way. Think about it. When you talk about the basis of bias, is there any other group that all of us will eventually join, right? All women won't eventually become men. All black people won't eventually become white, but every single one of us, if we live long enough, will become elderly. It's one of those few universal groups. Think about it. And the thing is, what's on the other side of being old? Death, right? So when you think about the elderly, not only do those physical traits, the breakdown come to mind, death comes to mind too. Can you see why it's universal now? Right, right. But the notion is every single person can project themselves into that group, and it has universal traits that affect all of us, and death is on the other side. That's why it's a universal bias at the implicit level. Does that make more sense now? Okay, all right. So I'm gonna show you an image on the screen. I'm gonna flash it. Everybody looking, I want you to tell me what you see. Everybody looking at the screen. Here we go, real quick. Here we go. What'd you see? How many, it was too quick? Okay, all right, some of y'all need a new prescription. All right, here we go. Look it again, here we go. Okay, that was a long time. What'd you see? A female face? Anybody see somebody that looked like a celebrity? John Lennon? Okay, good deal. Look again. And the question is, how many people do you see? Keep on looking. How many people do you see? Let's count them off. Originally, remember, you saw one, a woman or John Lennon. You saw one. We'll accept that this is John Lennon, the overall face, a little Imagine banner down there. Then we have a figure in white. That's the head. That's the hand. These are the wings right here. A figure in red. That's the head. These are the hands. These are the wings right here. And a little boy playing a guitar in the middle. You see that now? It's the same image. When I flashed it, you saw one. That's the implicit automatic subconscious level. When I gave you a time to process, you saw 4. That's the explicit conscious effortful level. Anytime you are awake, you have 2 processes going on at the same time, the implicit and the explicit. The implicit is fast, it has a lot of capacity, and you can multitask at the implicit automatic level, the subconscious level. You can drive, you can eat and talk at the same time, right? Automatic things you don't have to think about. At the explicit or conscious level, it's slower, It's more accurate, but you cannot multitask. There is no such thing as multitasking at a conscious or attention level basis. So people sitting here, I'm going to multitask while he trains us. No such thing. The mind can only process one bit of information with any level of depth at a time. When people say they're multitasking at a conscious level, what they're really doing is they're switching back and forth really quickly between different tasks. But they're not literally doing two things at the same time, okay? So you can tell the millennials and all your kids that professor from Morehouse said there's no such thing as multitasking. Yes, right? Because you give them instructions, you got to tell them 2 or 3 times because they texting and listen to you at the same time, talk about their multitasking. No such thing, okay? But here's the thing, folks. I wanted to distinguish the implicit, explicit. When I flashed it, your occipital lobe, the part of your brain responsible for vision, picked it up. You sensed it, but you did not perceive it. Perception adds meaning to sensation. When I give you more time to process, your brain, your mind put the pieces together and it came to a more accurate conclusion. It happens in social environments all the time. You can see somebody else and categorize them quickly. That's the flash. But when you have more time to process, you begin to see them as individuals. That's what we want to get. All right, so what does implicit bias look like in the real world? I got to speed this up, I'm sorry. All things being equal, yet a bit unequal, here we go. Taller employees actually receive higher wages than their shorter counterparts. And more attractive employees receive higher starting salaries than their less attractive counterparts. So if you're short, you better look good. All right, just keep it tight. Go to the gym, do what you got to do, work it out. I'm just saying, that's the science. Not me, it's the science. It's the science. Okay, all right, what else do we have? Qualifications being equal. That is credit score, financial history, income, etc. Blacks and Hispanics were less likely to be approved for home mortgages and paid higher interest rates on loans when they were approved. This last study was the last national study by HUD, so it's a bit dated. But this finding has been repeated as recently as a year and a half ago, where researchers will literally send folks into bank branches to apply for loans and get good faith estimates, and they still find racial disparities in the interest rates that they're offered. Next. Previous performance being equal. Kindergarten through 12th grade teachers have shown lower expectations and displayed less social comfort with African American students and some subgroups of Hispanics than white students. Various researchers have found this over the last 40 years, okay? Next, including minority teachers, by the way. Next, people who show implicit bias towards Latinos are more likely to oppose both illegal and legal immigration. So you know we have some immigration issues at the border right now. So this stuff is top of mind, and there's research that can be instructive in this regard. Next, symptoms being equal. African Americans and some subgroups of Hispanics are less likely to receive the most effective treatment for illnesses, even after matching them on income and insurance coverage. Racial disparities in healthcare is rampant. It's implicit, though, in many cases. Why? Physicians are really good at diagnosis. That's not where the racial disparities come in. The racial disparities come in at recommended treatment plans. In the U.S., white Americans are most likely to be recommended for cutting-edge surgeries, like they have like lasers and robots and that sort of thing, and to receive pain management prescriptions, right? Let's do it like this. You all do know there's an opioid crisis going on in the U.S. right now, right? Okay. What racial group is being disproportionately affected by the opioid crisis? Whites, right? Middle class and working class whites, right? For that addiction to opioids, for many of them, what was the initiating factor? How did the path to addiction begin for many of them? With what? A prescription for pain management. They get a prescription from a physician. The prescription runs out, they turn to fentanyl or heroin or whatever the case may be, right? In the US, whites more than any other group are most likely to receive a prescription for pain management from physicians. You know who's least likely? African Americans and Hispanics. Why? What the research suggests over the last 40 years, check this out, very interesting. And physicians of various racial groups, by the way. Blacks and Hispanics are the least likely to receive prescription medications for pain management from physicians. 3 main reasons. 1, physicians perceive that they might overuse a drug in terms of overdosing. 2, they may sell the drug to somebody else. Or 3, they lack the intelligence to follow the drug treatment schedule. You know how some drugs you got to take Monday, Wednesday, Friday, before, after a meal? Oh, that's too complicated for them. Give them the basics. Yeah. So you have both things going on. So whites have more positive traits associated with them. Blacks and Hispanics more negative traits, and that plays out in writing prescriptions. If you're a doctor and this person is sitting here, you know, you have a person, you have a certain impression of them, you're like, oh, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. That's how it happens. Not on the diagnosis side, on that prescription side. And it's very subtle, but it's also systematic based upon what we know from the healthcare sector. Next, check this out. This is deep right here, y'all. Regular weight job applicants, according to Body Mass Index, right, were less likely to be recommended to be hired for a job when they were seen in a photo sitting next to an obese applicant than when they were seen sitting alone or next to a regular weight person. Are y'all getting this? So literally, they've done studies in lab and other settings where they've had folks look at they had a resume and They had to evaluate a person based on their resume, and they showed them a picture of the candidate, and the candidate was for one group sitting next to an obese person, and for another group sitting next to a normal weight person. The only difference in those two conditions was who was in the second chair. They had a resume, and they had to evaluate this person. They found differential evaluations of the normal weight person. The scores are lower, and they were less likely to be recommended to be hired when they were sitting next to an obese person than when that same normal weight person was sitting alone or next to another normal weight person. It's called bias or stigma by association. So some of y'all are sitting there like, oh, I'm not affected by implicit bias. Really? When it can come down to the person sitting next to you and you don't know what's happening, they don't know what's happening, nor does anybody else in the room. Folks, y'all are grown. You can do what you want. I'm just giving you the science. But at a certain point, you kind of got to think there may be something to this. I'm giving you the ecosystem of bias, healthcare, education, loans, and so forth. We are swimming in disproportionate exposure, and this is what it looks like day to day, okay? I can't show this. Okay, so remember earlier I showed you that face, I flashed it, that second face in the middle of the screen? That was the face of a young black male. He is suspected of committing a crime, okay? I'm gonna show you a lineup, and I want you to pick that young black male's face out of this lineup. Right? And not all black men are suspects, obviously, but in this case, he's a suspect. Okay, so I'm gonna show you 5 faces. I'm gonna count, don't yell anything out. I'm gonna show you 5 faces. I'll count them off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I want you to raise your hand indicating who you think you remember seeing. All right, here we go. So this is suspect number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Don't yell anything out. How many of y'all remember seeing suspect number 1? Okay, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. All right, here's the thing you have to understand. I don't know if you can see this from your vantage point, but for me, I can see the whole audience. For every single one of these faces, at least 3 or 4 hands went up. Think about that. You all saw the same thing. Say I was a cop and I came in here and you all witnessed the crime. And I said, who done it? And I show you 5 faces. And I say face number 1, I get a few hands. Face number 2, different hands. Face number 3, what am I gonna conclude? Y'all don't know anything. Think about it. Somebody raised it's only one person. But hands went up for every single one of these 5. How do you explain that? This is called diversity of memory. I showed you one face and you literally remember differently. Folks, this stuff is deep. You can literally go through the same experience with somebody else and remember it differently. It just happened. One of these faces is correct. How do we get hands going up for all 5? Right? Okay, so the next time you watch that 6 o'clock news and they interviewed a witness on the street and the witness says, I don't know what I saw. It all happened so. All right, and here's the deal. The winner is 4. Number 4, right? Same position, you saw the same thing, you remember it differently, right? And then based upon how you remember something can bias how you see that person in the future. I wish I had more time. Here's the science. We're taking numerous factors into account. So for example, the seriousness of the primary offense, number of prior offenses, etc. Black males are the most prominent Afrocentric features. That is to say, dark skin, a wide nose, and full lips were most likely to receive longer sentences from judges, receive death penalty convictions from juries when the victim was white, not when the victim was black, and be mistaken for a suspect by police. This last study was by Jennifer Eberhardt, her colleagues up at Stanford University. They did extended work with the Oakland Police Department. Oakland PD, very diverse, white, black, Hispanic, Asian cops. They also did work with Oakland civilians, white, black, Hispanics, and so forth. She did the same thing I did with you all, showed them a face, and then later on said, pick that face out of a lineup. These are not the faces they used. I pulled these faces off the internet to make the point. But the bottom line is this. This is the target young man here. He's medium brown skin in terms of his complexion. This young man here is lighter. This young man here is lighter. This young man here is darker. This young man here is darker. What did they find? Amongst cops, white, black, Hispanic, Asian cops, and civilians, when they made a mistake picking a young black male out of a lineup, they tended to make an error in the direction of the darker. One of these 2. Beyond chance, reaching statistical significance. You ask the cop, well, you chose suspect number 3. That was incorrect. Why'd you choose him? That cop is not going to say because he was darker. The cop is going to say because that's what I thought it was. That's what makes it implicit. The cop can literally be telling the truth and be completely unaware that skin tone is playing a role. And he's still a good person. Yes. Okay. Right? So the notion is the skin tone, here's what you have to understand. Over the last 400 to 500 years, whether you know it or not, more positive traits have been associated with lighter skinned people and more negative traits with darker skinned people. Just due to society, a variety of other factors we don't have time to go into today, right? But it plays out systematically. And the mistake happens with white, black, Hispanic, Asian cops. This is not a white cop thing. This is a human being thing. If we live in a society where when we're exposed to darker skinned people, when more negative traits come up, the machinery of your mind will lock it in and you won't even know when it happens. And you still can be a good person. But let's not be naive when a scientist is smacking us about the head, okay? Next. Okay. So why does implicit bias exist in terms of causes? You might say, well, why are people biased? Implicit or explicit, why are people biased? A few reasons. Minimal group effect. People are biased. And folks, what I'm giving you here, this is critical because you're going to have conversations. And people want to say, well, why do we have skinheads and neo-Nazis and charlatans? I mean, how do we have all these hate groups and all that? I don't understand it. This is America. I understand it. As a scientist, human beings have extreme capacity, as you know, for wonderful, altruistic, wonderful, divine, great things, and also capacity to do some pretty negative, harsh, and demonic type things, okay? There's some flexibility there. But why are people biased? Minimal group effect. In-group favoritism occurs even when group membership is random. We are built to connect. We tend to connect with those closest to us, our friends and family. That in-group connection, pretty good, right? But when that in-group connection becomes so strong, it begins to disadvantage an out-group, that's the issue. Having a bias or favoritism towards your in-group in certain situations is perfectly understandable and acceptable until it begins to systematically disadvantage somebody else. That's what we have to look for. Next, competition over scarce resources leads to intergroup hostility and conflict. Why are people biased? Because sometimes there's limited resources and groups have to compete. And whatever group you're competing against for a scarce resource, you're going to begin to dislike, right? So a few years ago, when we have gas, food, and water, I'll give you jobs. So a few years ago in the U.S., when the unemployment rate was still a little higher, we had some of our fellow American citizens developing biases towards folks who were coming in from other countries, saying they're coming in and taking our jobs. They're coming in and taking our jobs. They saw jobs as a scarce resource, and they saw other people coming in taking those jobs, so they formed a bias towards that other group because it's a scarce resource that they value. That's another way that bias can form. Bias can also form because it relates to self-esteem. If other groups are inferior, then my group or I must be superior. Throughout the history of humankind, we've had hierarchies based on class, caste, race, masters and servants, whatever the case is. You've had social hierarchies, right? Imagine you're in the group on top, and there's 3 groups beneath you. You're in the group on top. Even if you're on the bottom of that top group, you know what that person can say? Not just you, the generic you. If you have somebody who's in the top group, if they're the bottom level of that top group and there's groups beneath them, that person can always say, at least I'm not one of them. If you're in the top group, even if you're amongst the bottom level of the top group, you can always look down on others. But why? Because you derive your self-esteem from being in the top group. Here's what you got to get. Some people don't have much going for them except for the groups to which they belong. As an individual, they're not very impressive. But they belong to a privileged group, and they derive self-esteem from belonging to that privileged group. And they don't want the status quo to change because it feels good to be on top. Why people bias? Rationalization for oppression. Powerful groups retain power through the use of stereotypes and prejudices, right? Think about it. Say you're in a caste system at 3 different levels. You're in the top group of the caste. You might say to yourself, I'm a good, well-meaning, ethical, moral person. How can I live in a society where there's a group on the bottom being oppressed? That doesn't sit well with me. You know what you're likely to do? The same thing that millions of folks throughout the history of humankind have done. Rationalize. Well, they do look a little different than us, different religion than us, different culture than us. We rationalize, tell ourselves rational lies in order to justify the oppression. Y'all missed that. I just said something. What else? Why are people biased? Socialization and exposure. We learn it. We learn it from who? Family, friends, teachers, peers, media, and personal experience. Some of the deepest biases you might have learned from people you love. And that's just real talk. We are flawed human beings raised by other flawed human beings. Just by growing up in your family, you've been exposed to certain stereotypes, prejudices, biases, and so forth. You've been exposed to it. You may have bought into some or pushed back. I don't know, but you have been exposed. So when you want to know why people bias, where does it come from? That's a huge source. Socialization. Some of the people closest to you can be the basis of your biases. And finally, lack of exposure to the diversity within other groups. When we're not exposed, like for example, we say things like Asian, Hispanic, Latino, so forth. Those are broad frames, but within those categories are many different subgroups. And if you're not exposed to all the different subgroups within a category like that, let's take Asian and so forth, you may just see them as one monolithic group. That's not the case. Many different countries, many different subcultures. But most of us don't have enough exposure to the diversity within other groups, so we tend to group them as see them as all being alike, and that is a form of bias. All right, this is record time I did this. Okay, all right, so how is implicit bias measured? I got 10 minutes, all right? I haven't actually write down much, but I want you to write this down. Or take a picture of the screen, put it in your phone, write it in crayon on the back of your hand, whatever you need to do. The implicit associations test. If you want to know if you have implicit bias at the thinking level, not the feeling, not the behavior, at the thinking level, group and trait, Google the implicit associations test. The first two links that pop up, one will say implicit.harvard.edu, the other one will say Project Implicit. Both of those links will take you to the same site. It is a Harvard-based site. Once you get there, there's over 30 different tests you can take to see if you have implicit bias towards a variety of groups. Over 30 different tests. Every single one of these tests are only 10 to 12 minutes. Completely anonymous, you and the machine, nobody else has to know. So you can say, well, he told us we all had biases, but I don't know what mine are. I'm showing you how to find out. This is how. What is it, IAT as we call it? What does it do? It measures the strength of subconscious associations between concepts or groups, such as Hispanic people or gay people, and evaluations such as good or bad, or stereotypes such as athletic or clumsy. Right? So you cannot use a conscious process to identify a subconscious bias. You need a tool like this. And this is just one of several, okay? But it's the most researched one, okay? All right, so I gotta move. This is great. Okay, how does implicit bias affect the target group? Oh my goodness, how much time do I have? I have 10, 7, 8, 5. Oh, okay, all right. Let me get some solutions then. All right, so let me just go ahead. I told too many stories on the front end. All right, so let's take this to the law enforcement space. So in our trainings of law enforcement, we present a fair amount of data, but we talk about trust, right? So this is from the 21st Century Policing Program, published in fall of 2015 and 2016, a few years ago. But this is a national survey of community trust in police, right? So it says, how much confidence do you have in police officers in your community to do a good job of enforcing the law, okay? So the response options there were 4 response options: just some, very little, a great deal, or a fair amount. So the blue bars represent trust. How much confidence do you have in police officers in your community to do a good job of enforcing the law? 63% of Hispanics had confidence, 52% of blacks, 83% of whites. How much confidence do you have in police officers in your community to not use excessive force on suspects? 45% of Hispanics had confidence, 36% of blacks, 74% of whites. How much confidence do you have in police officers in your community to treat Hispanics and whites equally? 46% of Hispanics had confidence, 41% of blacks, 72% of whites. How much confidence do you have in police officers in your community to treat blacks and whites equally? 47% of Hispanics had confidence, 36% of blacks, 72% of whites. This is what you call racial disparity in trust of the police. So when you all show up on the scene, you're counseling families and so forth, and you might feel a little tension, a little pushback, depending on the neighborhood you're in or the families you're dealing with, understand these dynamics. Let's not be naive, folks. You show up as the chaplain, so you get some folks will see you as a little different, like, okay, right, you're chaplain, but you're still coming with them, right? So if they have bias toward police, they're still trying to size you up. How authentic and genuine are you going to be in your encounter with them? At the end of the day, if they share something with you, do they basically see it as them sharing something with the police and you're going to share it out? All these types of dynamics can come up because of the unique role that you play. Okay? Especially with what you're going to find with African Americans and Hispanics. African Americans, according to the research, the most religious and spiritual racial group in the U.S., right? So the notion is if you show up as a chaplain, regardless of your package, you might get the benefit of the doubt in ways that the cop won't get, right? You can be a broker in that moment if you leverage that appropriately. Because the trust for the cop, you see the data. This is millions of folks participating in these studies, okay? All right, so in terms of officer-involved shootings, I can't go into that. I'm gonna give you some recommendations in the last 2-3 minutes that I have left. Oh my goodness. Okay, all right, so here's some things that you can do at the personal level, and then I'm gonna send you these slides so that way you can look at what can be done at the organizational level with the organizations with which you work. If you wanna reduce bias at the individual level, you as a person, here's some things you can do for free starting today. Individuation. This strategy relies on preventing stereotypical conclusions by obtaining specific information about group members. Oftentimes when we meet other people, we ask questions around their group status. So using this strategy helps people evaluate members of the target group based upon personal rather than group-based attributes. Sometimes you meet somebody else and you ask them, well, okay, what do you do? Where you from? Those are categorical type questions. I want you to get to the personal level where you can dig into somebody's interests, their hobbies, their favorite movie, book, color. Say you met me. You say, okay, Bryant, where you from? And I tell you I'm from New York City. And based upon me saying New York City, you might think to yourself, well, he probably likes the Yankees. He probably eats food off the street and probably likes cheesecake. Just because I said New York City, right? Now, 2 of those things happen to be true, but you don't know that, right? What you can do, say you see me, you want to personalize, individuate, you can say, okay, Bryant, I see you having a bow tie, right? Do you always wear bow ties or for special occasions? Is that a clip-on bow tie or a bow tie that you tie? Here's the thing, folks. I love bow ties. I own over 50 bow ties. My bow tie brother right there. Good to see you. All right. I own over 50 bow ties. So if you talk to me about bow ties, I could talk for 30 minutes about bow ties with passion, right? So now that conversation, you've individuated it. I'm no longer the black guy or the professor. I'm Bryant, the individual who likes bow ties. You individuate, okay? All right. What else can you do? Number 2, Perspective taking. We've been doing this all day. This strategy involves taking the perspective in the first person of a member of a stereotype group. Perspective taking increases psychological closeness to others, which decreases automatic group-based evaluations. Remember earlier when I asked you when I had those adjectives about young black men, and I said, imagine that's your personal brand? That's perspective taking. Can you look at the world through the lens or the eyes of somebody different than you? Even if somebody has your same package, they may have a different experience. Okay, they may have a different perspective, military, non-military, married, divorced. I mean, all types of perspectives can come in that's beyond the package. Next, we'll think of the perspective. I'm gonna give you another one. Everybody looking at the screen, it's my last one. I'm gonna flash it real quick. Everybody looking, here we go. Everybody looking, here we go. It's gonna be quick, What'd you see? Two old people, right? Most of y'all saw two old people. All right, look again. How many people do you see? Remember, you saw two initially. It's the same image. You saw two initially. Now you see five. Older woman here, younger woman here, younger man here, older man here, and hopefully his daughter coming up the side, not some other woman. All right, but the notion is, I flashed you, you saw two. I give you more time, you saw five. Same image, more time to process. Same thing with human beings. You can see somebody and categorize them quickly, or you can take the time to ask more questions, individuate, and have a more thorough and clear understanding of who they actually are. The picture will become clearer over time. Number 4, what can you do? 3. Counter-stereotypical imaging. Imagine in detail counter-stereotypical others. These others can be abstract. Say you have a bias towards Muslim people. You might imagine a Muslim family having dinner. That's a positive image. You can imagine a famous Muslim person, Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, whatever, or a personal friend that happens to be Muslim. You can literally sit, close your eyes, and go through these imagination exercises. Over time, research shows it can reduce your bias, okay? Next, this is record time. Stereotype replacement. Replace stereotypical responses for non-stereotypical responses. Basically, this involves recognizing that a response is based on a stereotype. Say, for example, a teacher walks into class the first day of class. Say it's middle school, and she sees Asian students. And the math teacher asks Asian students to join the math club on the first day of class. Teacher walks in, ooh, Asian, want to be in the math club? First day. That's not cool. What she's thinking is Asian equals math. What she needs to recognize is that was based on a stereotype and change her practice going forward, where she might say, I won't ask anyone to join the math club till after the first math exam. And finally, and this is the most popular one I need to get, increasing opportunities for positive contact. If you want to reduce bias, this is the most researched strategy for reducing bias, both implicit and explicit. What is this? Positive contact can change perceptions of a group or directly improve evaluations of that group. Seek opportunities to encounter and engage in positive interactions with outgroup members. Interact with and or develop genuine relationships with several outgroup members. Learn their history and culture. Go beyond, oh, this is my coworker, how's the family, how's the kids, how's your weekend? Go beyond that, right? Know about the history and culture with some level of depth. Could you represent their perspectives when they're not in the room? Do you know enough about their history and culture where you can talk about it with some sophistication? These are the challenges, these are the nuances, these are potential solutions, the pros and cons. You really know them and their history and culture. That's when you're talking about real relationship. Having diverse bodies in the same space, that's respecting diversity. Having engagement at some intimate level, that's valuing diversity. I just said something y'all missed. Okay. All right, so here, let me wrap up because I'm running out of time here. All right, so in terms of our take-home messages, I think you got the bulk of what I was saying. And again, this is 3.5 hours of information I'm trying to get in. We all have implicit biases, even towards our own group, but the social roles that we hold influence our implicit bias impact on others. Implicit bias has multiple causes, but exposure to associations of certain groups with specific traits is it's critical. Lord, y'all got me. That slipped. Okay. Implicit bias often, but doesn't always, affect our day-to-day feelings toward and treatment of others. So you can have implicit bias at the thinking level. You can associate a trait with a group, but that doesn't mean that you're going to mistreat that group or dislike that group. Okay. It doesn't have to filter out in those ways. Data, evidence, not just emotions or anecdotes, reveal implicit bias. If you want to know whether bias is at play, look at patterns of behavior over time. And every single one of us has our own data, our own personal narrative. Extreme behavior by a few members of groups, such as police, so quote unquote bad apples, towards specific outgroups, such as racial minorities, can cause bias amongst outgroups. Minorities not trusting the police. Folks, you could have 100 sworn officers, and if just 3 of them are quote unquote bad apples, that can wreak havoc on the relationship between the community and that police department. All right, he's counting me down. He's giving me a minute, okay? It's often easier, I got it, can we go? Okay. It's often easier to reduce biased behavior than biased thinking or feelings. Start there by implementing a few bias reducing strategies. Is the clock on the screen? What's on the screen? Okay. All right, there we go. All right, so I can't do this. It's wonderful. It's great. All right, so here's the deal, folks. The work that you all do day to day as I wrap up is critically important. You are in a unique position, right, as being chaplains, sort of in that space between law enforcement and the community. Please use that to your advantage. Understanding how bias can play in what you do, but also what you see amongst law enforcement is critical. You can see things that law enforcement is doing before they can. And you're in a position where they may be more receptive to feedback from you in a one-on-one space than a review of their higher-ups or the community. It's a very unique space you're in. They assume a certain level of morality and ethics associated with you because of your stature and your status. So if feedback is coming from you, it's often going to carry more weight with the officers and with the community. But you have to be willing to have the courageous conversation. It can be awkward, but you want them to be better. You don't do this to punish them. You do this out of love to make them better, right? We discipline those who we love. So we want to provide them with constructive feedback. So with all that being said, I hope that something that was said or done today has enhanced your trajectory from good to great or from great to greater. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a great day.
We're ready to dismiss. Just to let you know, this was our seed for next year. We're working to have Dr. Marks do either enhanced, enriched format or an advanced format. So, did you like that? Thank you very much. You're dismissed. Thank you.